All right, chapter 7. The three abstrusities. The aberration of light, the annual parallax of the stars, the regular annual shift of the lines of the stellar spectra. By the aberration of light is meant a displacement of all stars during a year's observation, by which stars near the pole of the ecliptic describe circles, stars near the ecliptic describe ellipses, and the stars of the ecliptic only little straight lines. It is supposed that light has velocity and that these forms represent the ratio between the velocity of light and the supposed velocity of this Earth in its orbit. In the year 1725, Bradley conceived of the present orthodox explanation of the aberration forms of the stars, that they reflect or represent the path that this Earth traverses around the sun, as it would look from the stars appearing virtually circular from the stars in the pole of the ecliptic, for instance. In Bradley's day, there were no definite delusions as to the traversing by this Earth of another path in space as part of a whole moving system, so Bradley felt simple and satisfied. About a century later, by some of the most amusing reasoning that one could be entertained with, astronomers decided that the whole supposed solar system is moving at a rate of about 13 miles a second from the region of Sirius to a point near Vega. All this occurring in northern skies because southern astronomers had not much to say at that time. Now then, if at one time in the year and in one part of its orbit this Earth is moving in the direction in which the whole solar system is moving, there we have this Earth traversing a distance that is the sum of its own motion and the general motion. Then, when the Earth rounds about and retraces, there we have its own velocity minus the general velocity. The first abstrusity, then, is knocked flat on its technicalities, because the aberration forms then do not reflect the annual motion of this Earth. If, in conventional terms, though the path of this Earth is circular or ecliptic relatively to the sun, when compounding with solar motion, it is not so formed relatively to the stars, and there will have to be another explanation for the aberration forms. The second supposed proof that this Earth moves around the sun is in the parallax of the stars. In conventional terms, it is said that opposite points in this Earth's orbit are 185 million miles apart. It is said that stars so differently viewed are minutely displaced against their backgrounds. Again, solar motion, if in conventional terms, this Earth has been traveling as part of the solar system from Sirius towards Vega. In 2,000 years, this Earth has traveled, what is that? 819,936,000,000 miles. This distance is 4,500 times the distance that is the baseline for orbital parallax. Then displacement of the stars by solar motion parallax is 2,000 years, should be 4,500 times the displacement by orbital parallax in 1 year. Give the orbital parallax Give the orbital parallax as my minute a quantity. Damn, hold on. Newt. All right. Give to orbital parallax as minute a quantity as is consistent with the claims made for it, and 4,500 times that would dent the Great Dipper and nick the sickle of Leo and perhaps make the dragon look like a dragon. But not a star in the heavens has changed more than doubtfully since the stars were catalogued by Hipparchus 2,000 years ago. If then there be a minute displacements of stars that are attributed to orbital parallax, they will have to be explained in some other way, if evidently the sun does not move from Sirius towards Vega, and if then, quite as reasonably, this Earth may not move. Professor Young's third proof is spectroscopic. To what degree can spectroscopy in astronomy be relied upon? Bryant, A History of Astronomy, page 206, that according to Belopolsky, Venus rotates in about 24 hours is determined by the spectroscope. That, according to Dr. Slipher, Venus posts in about 224 days as determined by the spectroscope. According to observations too numerous to make it necessary to cite any, the seeming motions of stars occulted by the moon show that the moon has atmosphere. According to the spectroscope, there is no atmosphere upon the moon. The ring of light around Venus during the transits of 1874 and 1882 indicate that Venus has atmosphere. Most astronomers say that Venus has an atmosphere of extreme density, obscuring the features of the planet. According to spectrum analysis by Sir William Huggins, Venus has no atmosphere. In the English Mechanic 89-439 are published results of spectroscopic examinations of Mars by Dr. Campbell of the Lick Observatory that there is no oxygen and that there is no water vapor on Mars. In monthly notices RAS 27-178 are published results of spectroscopic examinations of Mars by Huggins. Abundance of oxygen, same vapors as the vapors of this Earth. These are the amusements of our pilgrim's progress, which has New San Salvadors for its goals, or New Plymouth Rocks for its expectations, but these experiences of pilgrims have variety. In 1895, at the Allegheny Observatory, Professor Keeler undertook to determine the rotation period of Saturn's rings by spectroscopy. It is gravitational gospel that particles upon the outside of the rings move at the rate of 10.69 miles a second, particles upon the inner edge 13.01 miles a second. Professor Keeler's determinations were what Sir Robert Ball calls brilliant confirmation of the mathematical deduction. Professor Keeler announced that according to the spectroscope, the outside particles of the rings of Saturn move at the rate of 10.1 miles a second, and that the inner particles move at a rate of 12.4 miles a second, as they ought to, says Professor Young in his Gospel Elements of Astronomy. One reads of a miracle like this, the carrying out into decimals of different speeds of different particles and parts of a point of light, the parts of which cannot be seen at all without a telescope, whereby they seem to constitute a solid motionless structure, and one admires or one worships according to one's experience. Or there comes upon one a sense of imposture or imposition that is not very bearable, imposition or imposture, or captivation, and it's as if we've been trapped and have been put into a revolving cage, some of the bars revolving at unthinkable speed and other bars of it going around still faster, even though not conceivable. Disbelieve as we will, deride and accuse, and think of all the other false demonstrations that we have encountered as we will. There's the buzz of the bars that encircle us. The concoction that has caged us is one of the most brilliant harlots in modern prostitution. We're imprisoned at the pleasure of a favorite in the harem of the god of gravitation. That's some relief. Language always is. But how are we to determine that the rings of Saturn do not move as they ought to, and thereby add more to the discrediting of spectroscopy in astronomy? A gleam on a planet that's like shine on a sword to deliver us. The white spot of Saturn, a bright and shining deliverer. There's a gleam that will shatter concoctions and stop velocities. There's a shining thing on the planet Saturn, and the blow that it shines is lightning. Thus far has gone a revolution of 10.1 miles a second, but it stops by magic against magic. No farther buzzes a revolution of 12.4 miles a second that the rings of Saturn may not move as to flatter one little god they ought to, because by the handiwork of universality they may be motionless. Often has a white spot been seen upon the rings of Saturn by Schmidt, Bond, Secchi, Schroeder, Harding, Schwab, De Vico, and a host of other astronomers. It is stationary. In the English Mechanic 49-195, Thomas Gwyn Elgar publishes a sketch of it as he saw it upon the nights of April 18th and 20th, 1889. It occupied a position partly upon the one ring and partly upon the other, showing no distortion. Let Professor Keeler straddle two concentric merry-go-rounds whirling at different velocities. There will be distortion. See volume 49, English Mechanic, for observation after observation by astronomers upon this appearance. When seen from several months in the year 1889, the observers agreeing that, no matter what are the demands of theory, this fixed spot did indicate that the rings of Saturn do not move. The white spot on Saturn has blasted minor magic. He has little black retainers who now function in the cause of completeness. The little black spots of Saturn, Nature 53-109, that in July and August 1895, Professor Mascari of the Catania Observatory had seen dark spots upon the Krebs ring of Saturn. The writer in Nature says that such duration is not easy to explain if the rings of Saturn be formations of moving particles, because different parts of the discolored areas would have different velocities, so that soon would they distort and diffuse. Certainly enough, relatively to my purpose, which is to find out for myself and to find out with anybody else who may be equally impressed with a necessity, a brilliant criminal thing has been slain by a gleam of higher intensity. Certainly enough, then, with the execution of one of its foremost exponents, the whole subject of spectroscopy in astronomy has been cast into rout and disgrace, of course only to ourselves, and not in the view of manufacturers of spectroscopes, for instance. But a phantom thing dies a phantom's death and must be slain over and over again. I should say that just what is called the spectrum of a star is not commonly understood. It is one of the greatest uncertainties in science. The spectrum of a star is a ghost in the first place, but this ghost has to be further attenuated by a secondary process, and the whole appearance trembles so with the twinkling of a star that the stories told by spectra are gasps of palsied phantoms. So it is that, in one of the greatest indefinitenesses in science, an astronomer reads in a bewilderment that can be made to correspond with any desideratum. So it is our acceptance that when any faint, tremulous story told by a spectrum becomes standardized, the conventional astronomer is told by the spectroscope what he should be told. But that when anything new appears for which there is no convention, the bewilderment of the astronomers is made apparent, and the worthlessness of spectroscopy in astronomy is shown to all except those who do not want to be shown. Upon the 1st of February, 1892, Dr. Thomas D. Anderson of Edinburgh discovered a new star that became known as Nova Augurae. Here was something as to which there was no dogmatic determination. Each astronomer had to see not what he should, but what he could. We shall see that the astronomers might as well have gone for information to some of Mrs. Piper's controls as to think of depending upon their own ghosts. In monthly notices, February 1893, it is said that probably for 7 weeks, up to the time of calculation, one part of this new star had been receding at a rate of 230 miles a second, and another part approaching at a rate of 320 miles a second, giving to these components a distance apart of 550 miles, times 60, times 60, times 24, times 49, whatever that may be. But there was another seance. This time, Dr. Vogel was the medium. The ghost told Dr. Vogel that the new star had 3 parts. Hold on. The ghost told Dr. Vogel that the new star had 3 parts, one approaching this Earth at the rate of about 420 miles a second, another approaching at a rate of 22 miles a second, a third part receding at a rate of 300 miles a second. See Journal BAA 2-258. After that, the controls became hysterical. They flickered that there were 6 parts of this new star, according to Dr. Lowell's Evolution of Worlds, page 9. The faithful will be sorry to read that Lowell revolted. He says, "There's not room for so many on the stage of the cosmic drama. For the reasons for repudiating spectroscopy or spiritualism in astronomy, read what else Lowell says upon this subject. Nova Augura became fainter. That's Aurigae, became fainter. Accordingly, Professor Klinkerfues found that two bodies had passed and had inflamed each other, and that the light of their mutual disturbances would soon disappear. Nova Augura became brighter. Accordingly, Dr. Campbell determined that it was approaching this Earth at a rate of 128 miles a second. Then Dr. Espin went into a trance. It was revealed to him that the object was a nebula, communication from Dr. and Mrs. Huggins to the Royal Society. Not a nebula, but a star. See Nature 47-352-425. That according to M. Eugen Gothard, the spectrum of Na agreed perfectly with the spectrum of a nebula. That, according to Dr. Huggins, no contrast could be more striking than the difference between the spectrum of Na and the spectrum of a nebula. For an account of the revelations at Stonyhurst Observatory, see MEMS RAS 51-129, that there never had been a composition of bodies moving at the rates that were so definitely announced, because an A was a single star. Though I have read some of the communications from Rector and Dr. Finnott to Mrs. Piper, I cannot think that they ever mouthed sillier babble than was flickered by the star ghosts to the astronomers in the year 1892. We noted Professor Klinkerfues finding that two stars had passed each other and that the illumination from the mutual perturbations would soon subside. There was no such disappearance. For observations upon NA 10 years later, see monthly notices 62-65. For Professor Barnard's observations 20 years later, see Science American Sup 76-154. The spectroscope is useful in a laboratory. Spoons are useful in a kitchen. If any other pilgrim should come upon a group of engineers trying to dig a canal with spoons, his experience and his temptation to linger would be like ours as to the astronomers and their attempted application of the spectroscope. I don't know what of remotest acceptability may survive in the third supposed proof that this Earth moves around the sun, though we have not found it necessary to go into the technicalities of the supposed proof. I think we have killed the phantom thing, but I hope we have not quite succeeded, because we are moved more by the aesthetics of slaughter than by plain murderousness. We shall find unity in disposing of the third proof by the means by which the two others were disposed of. Regular annual shift of spectral lines versus solar motion. That if this Earth moves around the sun, the shift might be found by scientific Mrs. Pipers so to indicate. What? Okay. But that if part of the time this Earth as a part of one traveling system moves at a rate of 19 plus 13 miles a second, and then part of the time at a rate of 19 minus 13 miles a second, compounding with great complexities at traverse times, this is the end of the regular annual shift that is supposed to apply to orbital motion. We need not have admitted in the first place that the three astrucities are resistances. However, we have a liking for revelations ourselves. Aberration and parallax and spectral lines do not indicate only that this Earth moves relatively to the stars. Quite as convincingly, they indicate that the stars in one composition gyrate relatively to a central and stationary Earth. All of them in one concavity around this Earth, some of them showing faintest of parallax, if this Earth be not quite central to the revolving whole. Something that I did not mention before, though I referred to Lowell's statements, is that astronomers now admit or state that the shift of spectral lines, which they say indicates that this Earth moves around the sun, also indicates any one of the three other circumstances or sets of circumstances. Some persons will ask why I didn't say so at first, and quite the meaningless subject. Maybe it was a weakness of mine, something of a sporting instinct. I fear me I have at times. I lingered, perhaps slightly intoxicated, with the deliciousness of Professor Keeler and his decimals, like someone at a race track determining that a horse is running at a rate of 2,653 feet and 4 inches a minute by a method that means that no more than it means that the horse is brown, is making clattering sounds, or has a refreshing odor. For a study of a state of mind like that of many clergymen who try to believe in Moses and in Darwin too, see the works of Professor Young, for instance. This astronomer teaches the conventional spectroscopic doctrine and also mentions the other circumstances that make the doctrine meaningless. Such inconsistencies are phenomena of all transitions from the old to the new. 3 giants have appeared against us. Their hearts are bubbles, their bones wilt. They are the limp caryatides that uphold the phantom structure of paleoastronomy. By what miracle, we asked, by what miracle, we asked, could foundation be built subsequently under a baseless thing, but 3 ghosts can fit in anywhere? Sometimes astronomers cite the Foucault pendulum experiment as proof of the motions of this earth. The circumstances of this demonstration are not easily made clear. Consequently, one of the normal suspiciousness is likely to let it impose upon him. But my practical and commonplace treatment is to disregard what the experiment and its complexities are and to inquire whether it works out or not. It does not. See American Journal of Science 2-12-402, Eng Mech 93-293 and 306, Astro Reg 2-265. Also, we are told that experiments upon falling bodies have provided this Earth's rotation. I get so mentally, except as to ourselves, that. Wait a minute. I get so tired of demonstrating that there never has been any evolution mentally, except as to ourselves, that, if I could, I'd be glad to say that these experiments work out beautifully. Maybe they do. See Proctor's Old and New Astronomy, page 229.